Okay, this video is going to cover ableism, poverty, and vegan/vegetarian eating as a intersectionality. Simply put, and again, I am an environmentalist, and this is where beliefs, values, what you could do, and where you're at really kind of cross-connect. I am an environmentalist. I do understand that eating meat puts a far more of a burden on the environment than eating beans, eating plants. I acknowledge that fully, okay, and completely. It's also an issue, especially the way animals are often slaughtered, of inhumanity towards animals, okay? Even in the quote-unquote kosher slaughtering business, it's often not done in what I call, humane ways. At the same time, though, I've been treated in some pretty cruel and inhumane ways. So it's a balance, okay? My thing is that, and I'm not saying fair is, quote-unquote, I want to be, claim complete moral superiority to everyone, but I am saying that if it's a choice between me or the cow, and knowing that it's an imminent danger situation to me or my husband if we don't eat and have enough calories, versus the cow where by the time it gets to me, it's dead. By the time it gets to the grocery store, I haven't directly killed it. Long term, yes, that's an issue, but the fact is that I could boycott the meat industry for 20 years. It's still not going to prevent those cows from dying, okay, on its own. Whereas my going out and getting that, eating the meat, it'll prevent me and my husband from starving, and in terms of not enough calories, and if that's what it takes for 5 or 10 of those 20 years, I'm gonna do it, okay? Because the biggest thing, and I had this discussion a little bit before someone blocked me on Twitter. Again, I'm kind of glad to make that kind of an enemy, to be honest, to some extent. Is that I often have issues in terms of being able to cut up enough vegetables to make a nutritionally sound, proper meal. When you have issues with holding knives, I do. Same thing that I do with holding pens or pencils, in terms of using them properly. I really need a lot of physical therapy. Odds are, I don't know if I'll ever get it, but if I do, by the time I do, it's not really going to improve much. Okay? That's what the poverty is. That's what the disability is. That's what the intersectionality of the concept that the insurance industry, be it Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance, does not really do a heck of a lot when you have such substantial physical therapy needs. But again, baseline fact, in order to buy cheap vegetarian cuisine or meat-free cuisine, you need to buy dried goods, primarily completely unprocessed, which is to say dried beans, dried lentils, vegetables you can get a small amount of that are not cheap but somewhat affordable, pre-cooked, pre-chopped, but it's, in general, you're not going to be able to do it much. The only item that does not need cooking, the few items in terms of vegetables and fruits that do not need pre-cutting, and again, meals are going to be primarily made with vegetables and some kind of a starch. The only ones that you don't need to cut up, they're Brussels sprouts, and green beans, okay, and not too many really, and peas. And oh, by the way, peas, odds are you're gonna get them dried. So everything else, you need to cut it up extensively, or again, in the case of Brussels sprouts or asparagus as well, they're really, really pricey items. So, the real comparison in terms of a little bit of meat, and why I say it's cheaper, okay, for someone who's disabled, especially in the regards to any kind of hand problems, okay, be it caused by arthritis directly in part, which that's one of my biggest things, although there's a couple of other issues with my hands, related to my spine to a lesser degree, and when I say related, I want to be careful to remind folks, spinal issues does not mean paralysis. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with your spine short of that. Okay. So, therefore, again, what you're talking about in terms of trying to eat vegan or vegetarian, you'd have to buy dried goods, and you'd have to do all of the processing yourself. You would have to dry out large, sizable packages of tofu, cut it up, marinate it, then cook it. Okay? All of these things require manual dexterity in terms of all these processes in terms of tofu. Otherwise, and again, this is really why it's a better comparison, in terms of just ground beef, you would be talking about the pre-made tofu or fake meat burgers, which again, they really are pricey. So it's not a comparison, and I'm kind of getting tired of the nonsensical construct that eating vegan is cheaper because you're talking about a steak dinner, okay, or brisket versus mixed vegetables and rice. That's not the comparison that we're making at all. That's not the comparison I'm making at all. I'm saying that, especially in terms of the mixed vegetables, I'd have to buy and chop up all those vegetables, which might very well take me 2 or 3 days to get done. In terms of strength and in terms of hand pain, it might even take me a week, depending upon how bad the weather is, in terms of the rain aggravating my arthritis, barometric pressure. So you're comparing that with the concept of just a bit of rice or a bit of pasta, and me just going like this, which even that isn't easy, but so I do it slower, okay, with ground beef, with gloves on my fingers, for about 3 or 4 minutes, okay? I am doing a similar deal with 1 or 2 hot dogs, breaking them up and putting them in with rice or pasta, okay? and then putting in some either marinara, dirt cheap sauce, or tomato sauce, and calling that a meal. Because again, I need calories. And oh, by the way, I don't even really like the taste of any kind of meat at this point. Especially in terms of red meat. Chicken, it's okay. I kind of like it a little bit, but I could take it or leave it. Tofu burgers, fake chicken burgers, to me taste just as good. So it doesn't faze me. In terms of, and again, I know, some people, including, my spouse, it's an issue for him, taste. It isn't for me. It's an issue of, and he can't stand up as long, but he can use his hands better, of manual dexterity, manual pain tolerance in terms of dealing with all of the prep needed to fully and correctly prepare a nutritionally balanced and full diet on vegetarian food that I can actually buy enough of to get enough calories and overall nutrition to survive. And that, again, I'm not claiming that ground beef and hot dogs are great, wonderful sources of nutrition overall. I'm not at all doing that, not in the slightest bit. I am claiming, because it's true, that per unit of needed calories expressed for people with disabilities regarding their hands, like myself, comparing ground beef and hot dogs to tofu and tempeh, and beans in many cases, there's no questions asked. It's better. It's safer, mainly from again, keeping weight basis for me to eat a little bit of meat to be able to afford to feed my husband and myself. Again, long term, I know it's not great, but it's the best I can do. And as with everyone, I'm saying to people, do as much the best that you possibly can. I do get tofu burgers, okay, in terms of, fake meat burgers, but I can't afford to get them all the time. Can't do it. I do buy tofu blocks, but most of the time, I don't have the strength to process it myself. And that's a huge issue. Ableism, poverty, classism, as related to being a real environmentalist, a real person who cares about this planet. Think it over, folks. Comment. Again, I'm open door in terms of discussion. I wish that there were easier routes. I wish that there were better routes. Haven't found them yet. Shalom.